Good evening, everyone. Namaste. Let us begin our study of Upanishad with a prayer, chanting Om 3 times. Om. Om. Om Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Loka Shankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Bhararayanam Sutra Bhasha Kratau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Ishvaro Guruvatmeti Murtibheda Vibhagine Vyomavat Vyaptadehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Now we will also chant the Shantipata, Om Sahana Vavatu. So if you have your book or by memory, you can join me in this chant, just all together. Om Sahana Vavatu. Sahanao Bhunaktu. Sahaviryan Karavavahai. Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we be protected. May we feel nourished. May we develop a great energy together and feel that glow from the study. And may we also operate in a space of love. Peace be, peace be, peace be. Hari Om. So last week we started the second chapter, Brahmanandavali, the branch of the bliss of Brahman. And there we saw this new Shantipata where it was a prayer of Atu, may he protect us. That he there means Ishvara. May the Lord protect us. That supreme intelligence knows best. So may I develop that kind of mindset where I can have that trustful surrender to that intelligence and not be afraid to ask for help. So we're picking up from that Ishvara where we feel that as human beings we tend to lack. One requirement we saw was safety. Several different levels of safety, naturally physical safety, like a home, warmth, food, fresh water, clean air, all that, but also getting that sense of emotional safety too. That we're in an atmosphere that whether we react or we withdraw, that the Guru still loves us, sees us as the same. So, Om Sahana Avadu, may Ishvara protect us. Sahanao Bhunaktu, and also nourish us. When we feel the fruits of the study, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, and get that energy to pursue it diligently. Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. May we also get the tejas, the brilliance that comes as a result of understanding properly. Ma vidvishavahai. And may there be no quarrel. As I was saying last week, may that line, that cord of communication between the teacher's heart and the student's heart be free from any debris. So there's a smooth conduction of energy there. Peace at the level of body, peace at the level of mind, peace all around in the world. Peace in the past, peace in the future, peace in the present. And that present is where we experience past and future, actually. That one presence, really, rather, that one presence is what was discussed in that next mantra, beginning with Om. So we're going to chant this again and just do a bit of refresher on the significance of this Swarupa Lakshana, they call it, a directly pointing out the truth or the Brahman. The word we have for truth or the spirit is Brahman. So this particular definition is called Swarupa Lakshana, words that are pointing to or indicating directly the nature of Brahman. So this is different for those of you who are familiar with the study of Vedanta, different from the Tatastha Lakshana, they call it, where you're indicating from a vantage point. Typically, that's linguistically put as Brahman is not this, not this, not this, that neti methodology. So here, instead of saying Brahman is not this, not this, not this, not an observable, not an object, not something that's constructed, here Brahman is said directly what it is. So it makes you stunned and listen and develop that love for knowledge. You want to hear more and see how it's true. So we'll chant this mantra together. I'll chant it first just so you can get the sound of it and feel the rhythm, and then we'll break it apart so we can all join in chorus. Om Brahmaveda apnoti param tadeshabhyukta satyam jnanamanantam brahma yo veda nihitam guhayam parame vyoman so oshnute sarvan kama ansaha brahmana vipaschateti. So you can repeat after me. Om
Om
Brahmaveda apnoti param
Brahmavid Apanati Param
Tadeshabhyukta
Tadesha Abhyukta
Satyam Jnanamanantam Brahma
Satyam
Yanamanantam Brahma
Yo Veda Nihitam Guhayam
Yo Veda
Yaveda
Nihitam Guhayam
Parame Vyoman
Param
Vyoman
Vyoman
So Oshnute
So Nushe
Sarvan
Sarvan
Kama Ansaha
Kam Ansaha
Brahmana Vipaschateti.
Brahmana Vipashyateti.
Yes, good. So Parame Vyoman. This seems that there's some vast space in the center of your chest. The heart, they call it. So to be very clear, since Vedanta, the role of the teacher is to give you clarity, not make things up and excite us. So to be very clear and technical, I must be saying that this heart space that's known mystically, and sometimes we put it in a poetic nature, is very clearly your own mind, your capacity to know. But there, the knowing is unique because we're bringing the pramana, or this means of knowledge called Mother Shruti, the Upanishad, which we're studying. And as a result of listening to that Upanishad, expounded by a guru, a new kind of mode of mind is generated. So that's called a vritti in Sanskrit, a fluctuation in the mind, a kind of mode, a cognitive episode. But here, what's unique about the vritti generated by listening to the scripture is that that vritti is not a vritti that's subject to change. And it's not object reference. It's with reference to yourself. So the technical word for that is a khandakara vritti, a khandakara vritti, a khanda akara vritti, which means there's an unbroken vritti, a khanda akara vritti. That kind of vritti is with reference to self. Suddenly you start recognizing, ooh, something's holding all my experiences together. And that is aham, I. So that mode of mind is what's known as heart, that space, that window to one's being, which is reverberating and connecting your experiences as I. That's called hridayam, the heart. So there's many ways we can put this to try to convey the profundity of it, but I'm also giving you a very technical definition just so you get that clarity and sense of, oh, I know what's being said, and it shouldn't go against what I reason. So that's called hridayam, the heart, or what's said here in a poetic way, nihitam guhayam. It's existing in the cave, guhayam parame, in that transcendental akasha, vyoman, that space. Vyoman means that space of the heart. What is that that's existing there? What's existing there is the reflection of the truth. And the name for that truth is Brahman. And the Upanishad says, Om, the knower of Brahman attains the supreme. That was the sentence that we were trying to unpack last week. So there was 4 different parts to that we saw. Brahman, Vita, the knower, Apnoti, attains, Param, the supreme. And when we further looked into that, there were several different leaps and bounds that we had to take. So you have to fasten your seatbelt and go along for the ride, but don't forget to fasten. Otherwise, you'll miss and won't get to enjoy the ride. I had that experience once at a carnival. You know, those terrifying Viking ships that swing back and forth? And then they put that, you get into the boat and then you strap that bar down, and then the machine starts and then you start rocking back and forth. I couldn't get the bar all the way down. Spoiled the whole experience. So here, the bar down means let me get clarity on prameya, or what is it I'm actually seeking? That's called param. What you really want is param. This is the first handlebar that you have to get locked in before we go for the ride. What I'm really seeking as a paramatra, as a doer, knower, enjoyer, thinker, seer, all the roles I play, what I really find that I'm looking for is in Sanskrit called param, but in English is called happiness. So simple. And that sounds a little fluffy and doesn't sound quite true. I have so many goals and ambitions. How are you just saying that I'm just trying to be happy? A happy-go-lucky guy. That sounds a little lame. But here, it's only because we're confusing happiness, which is ontological reality, with the fleeting pleasures that we experience, like the pleasure we get in eating cake, or the pleasure we get in a good conversation, or the pleasure we get in meeting a loved one. Nothing wrong with any of those, especially the cake. It's very tasty. But that's a temporary pleasure. It comes and goes, and then also has a boundary, limitation, and sometimes a lot of these pleasures have an ill effect on our health when not managed properly. So here, what we're talking about as what I'm seeking as param is that real lasting joy. I want the bliss of Brahman. So if that excites you, you got that clarity. What is it I'm seeking is that it's happiness. I seek to be a happy person, fulfilled within, and to express that. That's called prameya siddhi, to know what you want clearly. And the fantastic thing about it is there's actually no choice involved in that. It's more about vida, knowing. It's kind of a maturity on the part of the seeker of recognizing, dare I say, even when I want meditative joys from entering into a kind of samadhi state, that also comes and goes. So there's a certain maturity born of having lots of experiences where finally one sits down, says, wait a moment, life is so short. What's happening here? What's connecting all my experiences? And what is it that I'm seeking through them? And that's called param, joy. We saw there for that Brahman, knowing it, you gain that param, that joy, then naturally Brahman's nature should be joy. So param and Brahman mean the same thing. That was another leap that we took after that. then we saw that how is it possible that just by knowing the Brahman, I, as an individual, gain that status, gain that Brahman, gain that joy? There, the tremendous leap that one takes is with reference now to what Pramana says. Pramana says that your nature is intrinsically joy. So there's no attainment. There's no reaching there. There's no becoming. Because if I reach there, then I can also move away from it. If I attain it, then I can lose it. If I become it, then I can also unbecome it. So that's why they say this is the ending of samsara. Samsara really doesn't mean cycle of rebirths. Samsara means the cycle of chasing your shadow. Samsara means the cycle of becoming, always trying to become something better and never feeling that you're enough. But Upanishad says something very different, and that you are complete, Purnam. You are whole, and there's nothing you can do to lose that. So that excites you, hearing that. A wise person gets, their ears open up, their eyes sparkle, the tears begin to flow. They feel, oh, this is what I want, and it seems possible. And Upanishad says yes. So the means for knowing that is listening. That's a huge leap and takes some initial shraddha, some feeling of trust and inspiration by what the teacher is saying. So that pramana siddhi means I start to recognize that param, happiness, which is nature of Brahman, isn't an object that I can get. Even a subtle object like a particular mental state, like a state born of some mystical experience in meditation, that makes you very relaxed because you start to collapse into yourself, which means that I don't have to do anything to be happy anymore. I can wake up from the beginning of the day to the last moment where my eyelids gently close and I slip into sleep and live as a happy person. It is possible. And that happiness is large enough to accommodate all your fears, all your desires, all your doubts, all the things that you think are unholy. That happiness or that Brahman is vast enough to accommodate all of our different mental fluctuations or waves because the mind is shining in that. So that feeling that, wait, I recognize that this is not something to be reached, but something to be understood. That's a kind of accomplishment. That's called pramana siddhi. That's why the knower, Brahmavit, apnoti, attains that. So we're taking leaps here. And then lastly, as a result of that, when that kind of understanding dawns in your mind, who's the one operating that pramana, listening, and who's fit to listen? That's called pramatra siddhi, which means, hey, I recognize that there may be some disciplines that are involved in being able to hear this fully and see it through. So you're called the pramatra here, the knower. And all different kinds of other means of knowledge, the pramatra, me, what I'm seeking, the prameya, and the means to reach what I'm seeking are all different. So that's called tripart knowledge. There's three things there: me, the sought, and the method. It's called tripiti jnana. There's three things involved, and they're always different. And then I get it, or I don't get it, and then I lose it again. So that's kind of knowledge that we're familiar with. And you don't need any more experiences to know that. That just comes from living. But to gain the culture and the birth of this wisdom, a new kind of knowledge we're seeing is born, which is called aparoksha jnanam. There, the tripartite knowledge collapses because I'm the seeker, the sought happens to be me, and the means are listening to the Upanishad, which is telling me who I am. So there, you sink into yourself. And that kind of knowledge is called aparoksha jnanam. Why aparoksha? Paroksha means direct experience where you objectify something through your senses. Aparoksha, that prefix aparoksha means immediate. There's no mediator between you and the happiness you seek. There's nothing you have to do there. It's just about being. So this knowledge makes you cheerful. It's the great savor. It's the great grace. So there's different ways you can know. You can use your senses pratyaksham. You can also gain some inference, which is also based upon your pratyaksham. Like you see the smoke, so you infer, there must be some fire. That's a kind of knowledge. There's also sakshi pratyaksham, where you can witness your inner theater of mind, your different thoughts and feelings. You're aware that I'm feeling, I'm thinking, I'm confused, I have some confidence. So you're aware of your mental state. That's another kind of knowledge called sakshi pratyaksham. But to know that sakshi, that presence, happens to be the whole, which is you, that kind of knowledge is called aparoksha jnanam, or the knowledge of Brahman. And that dawns in your heart. So it's very difficult to try to capture the dawning of that knowledge into words. So that's why we say, Nihitam guhayam parame vyoman. It may express itself in different ways for different seekers. When you hear this for the first time, you may just want to get up and dance. Or you may shed tears of joy and then finally be able to let loose. Or you may just become silent. So its expression may vary, but the knowledge is the same. Om Brahma Veda apnoti param tadeshabhyukta. And that Brahman's nature is Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. It is the thread running through all experiences, past, present, future. Satyam, unchanging. It is the very basis by which all knowledge is born. Jnanam, consciousness. There, jnana means consciousness. And also anantam. There's nothing away from that Brahman or limiting that Brahman. Satyam jnanam anantam Brahma. Yo veda nihitam guhayam parame vyoman so oshnute sarvan kama ansaha brahmana vipaschateti vipaschata. So you become a seer. One who knows this Brahman gains that knowledge. And also the Upanishad says, attains all their desires, sarvan kaman. And we saw that seems ridiculous from the outset. But when we start to recognize that all desires are rooted in may I be happy, may I feel complete, freedom from lack, freedom from sorrow. So when we see that, it's very easy to recognize that all desires are fulfilled. Therefore, desire then becomes a tool. This is where most acharyas stop, but not Sambodhis, followers of Swami Buddhananda, and the real Advaitic teachings, which Upanishad is about to present, which is that moksha is not the end, it's really the beginning. When you recognize this happiness, you can't help but express in your own unique way. And that's what Brahman did. This Brahman, out of its fullness, desired. Now, let us take up the next mantra. We could spend all class on this one, but let's continue. This next mantra is that Brahman wants to play because he's so happy. And that play is through the body, mind, ego mask. So here, Brahman's now putting on the mask, the seeming mask, which is our own body, mind, ego. And Upanishad gives us a mantra of how that's taking place. So you can think of this, technically it's called Tattva Utpatti, how the Brahman, which is whole, indivisible, objectless awareness, manifests or appears as you and I, human beings. So let's see. What you'll find too is you have to have a little patience because this is kind of like the rishi throwing paint on a canvas. Sometimes when the creation story, because of it's so wonderful, and essentially it's not there. Sometimes the way that the creation's described, sometimes it's described as shadow play. Sometimes it's just by a mere thought that Brahman creates. Here, the way the Rishi describes it is a little different. It's a little more systematic in that it's called Krama Shrishti. Brahman creates through these structures, from the subtle to the gross. So here, our intellect can appreciate this a little bit better than some of the other ways creation is described, because it's more logical. It shows us that Brahman first expresses as the most subtle through the subtle elements, down to you and I. So let's see what it says. Tasmad va etasmad atmana akasha sambhutah akashat vayuh vayoragnihi agnerapah adbhyah prative prativya oshadhayah oshadhebhyo annam anat purushah. Okay, so you can repeat after me. Tasmad va
Tasmatva
etasmad atmana
etasmat atmana
akasha sambhutah
akasha sambhutah
akashad vayuh
akashad vayuh
vayoragnihi
vayuragnihi
agnerapah
agrapah
adbhyah prative
adbhyaprithive
prativya
prithivya
oshadhayah
oshadaya
oshadhebhyo annam
oshadibhyo annam
anat purushah.
anat
Now, to my dear friend Seth's comment last week was about inquiring whether or not this previous mantra was a Mahavakya. Not quite, but it comes here, immediately following. So, tasmat, from that Brahman, vai, which is verily a tasmat atmana, which is verily this Atman. That's put there. From this Brahman, vai, that's kind of an emphasis. A tasmat, which is the same as the Atman, Atmanaha. Akasha is born. Akasha sambhutaha. There's a kind of Mahavakya there. Upanishad just said, from that supreme Brahman, that joy which you are, which is the same as this Atmanaha, the self. Atman means the ground of the I, you, which makes your hair stand on end. Oh my goodness. I know that you said that happiness was my nature and that there's some Brahman, but then suddenly Brahman is equated to me. Etasmad va etasmad atmana. From that, what is born, sambhutaha, is space. He says, akasha sambhutaha. Space is born. So the first Mahabhuta, those tanmatras, meaning that dik, that direction, spread out in all areas. Space, akasha sambhutaha. From that akasha, akashad vayuhu, wind, the air is born. Vayoragnihi, from that vayu, fire. Agnerapah, from fire, apa, water. Adbhyat prativi, and from that water, earth, prativi. So the five elements manifest, Panchabhutas. So those Panchabhutas first, inhering in those Panchabhutas is Brahman. That's the key here. This Brahman is not standing apart from the creation. Here, the Shrishti, or this kind of creation, is where the creator and the creation are non-separate. From that Brahman comes Akasha. So Akasha is non-separate from, never away from the Brahman. Putting it very clearly, consciousness is a never away from and pervading the space. Space is never away from the Brahman. Suddenly, everything that's within space now becomes holy. Because Brahman, God is never away from it. Akasha sambhutaha. Akashad vayuhu. So wind comes, fire, water, and earth. So just a technical note here, now we're talking kind of about the physics of the 5 elements. So here it doesn't go into the detail, but just for your own clarity, um, just for verbal clarity, what happens is that this Brahman, when it takes on the mask of play, it plays through what's known as the 3 gunas, the 3 fundamental energies of light, motion, mass. So there, that light means the capacity to reflect something. There, the motion means just the movement principle. Something stirs. That's why sometimes they say Devi blinks. Devi meaning the supreme Brahman. Or Shiva rattles his drum, the Damaru. So there, that rattling is the rajas. Some motion takes place. And then also something that holds it together, gives it stability, tamas. So it's called sattva, rajas, and tamas. Those fundamental forces inhere through the 5 elements. And whether the elements are more sattva, more rajas, or more tamasic, they have different expressions. So I'll just briefly explain those and try to connect it all. How is it? So from the sattvic aspect, we saw sattva means reflection. So from the sattvic aspect of the elements comes our senses, our ability to perceive, the jnanendriyas. How do we gain knowledge? Through your ears, through your eyes, through your skin. So through the ability to perceive, the sattvic elements are predominant there. The whole of the sattvic elements is actually your mind, born out of all of the sattvic element. The rajasic aspect of those comes the karmendriyas, which means our action, organs of action, like hands, pick a pen, take a cup, or your speech. Their action is involved, so that's born of the rajasic part of the elements. And there, the total sum of those rajasic elements is our prana. We're going to be learning more about the prana to come, which means the vital winds in you. They're moving, their nature is movement, rajas, and they support your senses. Then, lastly, how does it come to the physical body? Is that there's a kind of permutation and combination of the elements that makes them more physical. That's how we get the physical body. So the physical body is also made of 5 elements, but there the elements are not in their pure state. Actually, half of the element is in its pure state, and then it's mingled with 1/8 of all the other elements. I know that's a little bit confusing. We have to draw a picture for this. I was actually thinking I may try to connect my iPad to this so we can do some doodling. That way I can present to you, draw a couple of diagrams. Because this, you have to get a visual picture of that. And then you internalize it. You see it's true. So for the physical body itself, it's made of the tamasic aspect of the elements. Why is it tamasic? Just because those elements are a little bit more grounded as they're mixed and mingled with all the other elements. For example, the physical space that we experience is not pure space. It's half akasha and then 1/8 of wind, fire, earth, water. So there's 1/8 percentage of all those other elements mixed with space, which gives it its physicalness. I hope that makes sense. So anyway, what Upanishad shows us is that the Brahman is flowing in and throughout all these elements. From that Brahman, space and onward expresses itself. So you can think about this as really the physics. Now we're talking about the physical elements. What happens as a result of that? We saw we ended up in Advait Chaitanya, in the earth element. Then it says, Taittiriya Upanishad. Now we come from physics, we come to biology. Now we're talking about the plant kingdom. Oshadhi means herbs, and plants and herbs. And from the plant kingdom, we also get food. Annam. So, plant kingdom, and then food. Annam. And then from biology, you move to culture. Anat, Purushaha. Then a human being's born. You and I, this person. Purusha here means the person, or the human being. So here the kind of model that Rishi gives you is that the human being this human embodiment we have is actually born of food, which is coming from the nature, the Oshadi, the plants and herbs, the earth element. And that earth element is nurtured by the rains, the water element. The water element is present because of the fire and done in the yajna. Yajna is possible because of knowledge. Knowledge rests in Brahman. So everything's connected up. That also makes us supremely joyful when you think about that chain of events. Oh my goodness. Oshadibhyo annam anna purushaha. So sometimes the Upanishad presents this model where they say you got to do the yajna because actually that rain that comes as a result of making your offerings, supposedly, and you may have experienced it, when you do a proper yajna or some kind of fire worship with the mantra, you get rain. And that rain is seen as a blessing from the gods. But supposedly, it's in that rain that the sentient beings are coming from the heavens, those new jivas. That's the story there. So then they get into that food, into the earth element. They grow as crops. And when you and I eat that and procreate, once that's assimilated into the seminal reproductive fluid, that jiva gets born. This is the trail of events, how the field of desire, ethereal field of desire of an individual gets condensed and expressed in its appropriate vehicle. So it could be picked up by a snake, or it could be picked up by some other creature. But you and I were blessed that that food was picked up by the parents, and then they became the vehicle by which we express, gain the knowledge, and live out this Brahmanhood. So, Oshadibhyo annam anat purushaha. So we went from the 5 elements, the physics, to the biology, Oshadi, the plants, and food, annam, and then to Purusha. So that Purusha there is still non-separate from the Brahman. So this isn't Parinamavada, which means that Brahman becomes or gets transformed into these elements. Brahman's appearing, expressing his magical show that's called Maya, which we'll look into more. So that's a kind of vision that the Vedanta gives you called appearance theory. Vivartavada. It's possible that something appears but essentially is not there. That's called play. And it totally explains the purity and the unchanging nature of the Brahman. Just like the concavity that we subscribe to the sky, but it's really not there, or the blue color. You look up and you say, oh, it looks like I'm in a globe, or the sky's all blue. But then you go up there and you say, oh, it's not really there. So you can experience something, but essentially it need not be real. Similarly, we experience and interact with life, enjoy it, but essentially it's all a play of the same Brahman. Just like that. Let's continue. So that's a big leap in itself. Tasmat va e tasmat atmana akasha sambhuta. That Brahman, which is this Atman, expresses. So the guru is teaching the student about creation. And we're going to see also too, later in the chapter, especially in the last chapter, we're going to see how this is operationalized too, the sanctity and sacredness of the world being an expression of the Brahman, which gives us a lot of privilege and freedom to worship in many ways. So now the methodology. How do I, the ascension, if you will. So this is kind of talking about from that ontological reality down to the human being, which I'm currently identifying as. How do I go up or reclaim, fly to those heights of the Brahmanhood, reclaim my status as that? It says that Brahman is this Atman. This Atman is that Brahman. So how do I recognize the truth of that or understand that fully? So we're seeing already this is a process of understanding. It's a cognitive shift versus you becoming something. You're already that Brahman, joy. But I want to know that clearly, doubt-free. That's possible. So how to do that is a very fine methodology of seeing 5 different layers, if you will, or 5 different expressions of the truth where we can commit a mistake, meaning we have some confusion about who we are with reference to what we have. And that methodology, the technical term for that is called Panchakosha Viveka. You can think of this as, instead of Tattva Utpatti, the descent, Tattva Viveka, moving back or reclaiming our status as joy. So now the Rishi gives us an interesting model where it describes these different sheaths. And just by hearing about them, learning about them, you already grow in that viveka, that discernment ability. Because you start to recognize, oh, that's true. Sometimes I do get my identity stuck with this. Sometimes I do kind of feel limited and small in this sphere, but I know that that's not who I really am. And that way you work back. So you have to see the truth of this. When we're explaining this, we're not just talking about some phenomenon outside. We're talking about deeply where you're identifying, your identity. So therefore you have to be patient, listen carefully, and see the truth of it. Is what's being said in alignment with my experience? Yes. Then you move on that way. So this is Shankaracharya's 3 tests. Upanishad, Shruti, Yukti. It should be in alignment with your understanding, your logic. It's not an out of alignment with your logic or reasoning. So don't give it up. And also anubhavam. You have to see the truth of it or experience it. See, oh yeah, this is something I identify with, but I know I'm so much more. So this way we go. So now we begin that vichara, proper reflection upon these different sheaths, and it begins naturally at the level of the physical. Annamaya kosha. That's what we're really looking at now. So this is the next mantra, and I'll chant it for us first. Sava esha purusho anna rasamayaha tasyedameva shiraha ayam dakshinah pakshaha ayam uttarav pakshaha ayam atma a idam pucham pratishtha tadapyesha sloko bhavati. Okay, now you can repeat after me. Sava esha
Savaisha
purusho anna rasamayaha
Purusho Anna Rasamaya
Anakasamaya
tasyedameva shiraha
Tasmeda
Tasyedameva
Devasiraha
Shiraha
ayam dakshinah pakshaha
Ayam
Ayam
Dakshina
Dakshina
Pakshaha
Pakshaha
ayam uttarav pakshaha
Ayam
Ayam
Uttara
Uttara
Pakshaha
Pakshaha
ayam atma a
Ayam
Ayam
Atma
Atma
idam pucham pratishtha
Idam
Idam
Pucham
Pucham
Pratishtha
Pratishtha
tadapyesha
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 shloka bhavati.
Shloko
Shloka
Bhavati
Bhavati.
Iti.
Okay, so saha, this person, vai eshaha purushaha. So this person is first consisting of made of annam, anna rasamayaha, the essence of food. That's what's said. Anna rasamayaha. So now we're talking about your body. Let us begin there. So how beautiful. We're not skipping to the transcendental and then being confused about our own physicality or our biology. Here we're saying, let us embrace the body in the awareness and discover our wholeness and not be so caught up with our identifying with the body, but rather seeing that space by which we can manage it appropriately. All the sensations are presented to you anyway, so you're the most fit for managing your own body, but so much more. So we start by looking at the body is described here as anna rasamayaha. That means the essence, rasa. Rasa means here the essence of what you eat. So therefore, dietary discipline is useful because what you're consuming, when it breaks down in its finest essence, becomes mind and body. Other Upanishad talks about that model too. What you drink becomes your vital forces, your prana. So therefore, water, boiled milk, some ghee, fresh vegetables, good grains. It's so simple. This is what you need. That essence becomes this Purusha, this person. Now, the way that this, it's a little funny. There's many ways we could look at it, but the way that this Rishi is describing the sheaths is as a bird. He's got a paksha. He's got wings. And also pucham. Pucham. That means the tail. So these sheaths are described as a bird. You can visualize that. He's got a head. Bird has a trunk, that fluffy belly, some wings, and then a tail. So the koshas, you don't hear this when you listen to the modern teachers. This kosha is described as a bird. And this first bird, or this first sheath, is made out of anna rasamaya. One thing I want to say at the very start of this is as we're doing this reflection, this viveka. Viveka, the root word of viveka means vik, to separate. But here, this separation is not like separating two objects, like you take away the the peel from the banana and then discard it and then slip on it later. It's not like that kind of mistake. It's more like cognitively seeing something. Like when you see, you can see the sun rise and set, but you start to cognitively know sun is not rising up in the sky and then going back down. It's because of the rotation of the earth. So similarly here, you're not removing anything by this viveka. Rather, I would say that you're including it and seeing it in its relationship with who you are. So it's a very holistic approach. So this essence of food is something like a bird. So here you're going to talk about, it's going to talk about the head, trunk, wings, and tail. So this is pretty straightforward. Anna rasamayaha tasya idam eva shiraha. This bird has a head. This kosha has a head. Shiraha. It has dakshina pakshaha, a right wing. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the Sanskrit, I also have to describe this. It says dakshina. Pakshaha means a wing. It says dakshina, which means south. You may be familiar with Dakshinamurti, the one who sits in the south. So here that word dakshina means south. So what does it mean by the south wing? I know you have to do a little visualization here, but if you're facing east, east is at the head, that means that south will now be on your right. So north is going to be on your left. West will be the tail. So north, east, south, west, down. So when it says dakshina pakshana, whenever you hear that word dakshina, you can think of the right side, the right arm, or right wing. So here, this bird is consisting of a head, shiraha, also dakshina pakshaha, a right wing. Then also I am uttara pakshaha. Uttara here means left wing, should be the north. Uttara pakshaha. Then I am atma. Atma here means trunk. It means the chest. That you just have to note. Atma here in this context means the trunk of the bird. Idam pucham pratishtha. Also pucham, which means the tail. So we have this bird. This is the first kosha, which means your physical body. Physical body is constituting of a head, arms, chest, trunk, then the legs. Very straightforward. Now, tata, about that, api eshaha sloka bhavati. There's a sloka. So these rishis are saying, we learned this from our teacher, and we're going to quote, back it up. So practically, Annamaya Kosha means that we have a tendency as human beings, complete person, to identify with our body And this is the first and greatest leap that one can make, is recognizing that I'm so much more than just my physical body. Physical body is an incredible gift. It's also the instrument that you do your dharma. But it's one small part of the vastness that you are. So why it's called a kosha? Kosha doesn't mean that you have to remove it. Kosha means you have to see that my eye is not locked up there. My eye is much greater than that. So that's why it's a kosha. Kosha means that I make a mistake when I start to suffer because of the happenings at the level of the body. That's the insight there. It doesn't mean get rid of your body. It means that I am suffering because of some conditions of the body. That is a mistake, and it has no place. So we have to see the truth of that. When we identify with this particular kosha, annamaya, it shows up in our language, for example, as whatever conditions or states the body is in. It could be age, I'm young, or I'm old. That's a condition of the physical body. Spirit has no birth. So, or it could be with relationship to the skin color. I am dark, I am fair. If people just understood Annamaya Kosha, look how many problems would be solved in the world. All this fight with race. So just recognizing that this is just one part of our expression. This has nothing to do with who we essentially are. So color is another way that we identify. You can also think of the shape of the body. That's another way. I'm thin, or I am fat, I am tall, or I am short. So these are ways that we're identifying ourselves. And you don't have to change your speech. That's where sometimes these teachers or students, as they're listening, become a little pretentious. It sounds a little funny. No, I'm not the body. And then they start speaking in third person. I don't encourage that. It's a little funny. And you don't need to, because cognitively you're understanding this body is how I express myself as that Supreme Brahman. So therefore, I can say, yeah, I'm 5'8" to the doctor. When the doctor asks you how tall you are, you say, I have no height. I am the immortal Brahman. They say, go, come on. What is this guy talking about? Let's send him to the mental hospital. So don't do that. That's confusing. Don't confuse other people. Gita tells us that. Sri Krishna says, don't unsettle people's understanding. You know deeply within, I'm so much more than my body. But when we're discussing things in practical matter, you can say, yeah, it'd be better for my health to reduce my sugar intake, lose a few pounds, or I need to bulk up a little bit. That's okay. You're just taking care of the body, but you are not the body. You're something more. So thin, fat, short, tall, black, white, so many different ways I could describe how we identify with the body. That's why it's called kosha, annamaya kosha. Now, let's see. Tadapyesha shloka bhavate. What's this particular shloka that the Rishi brings? Here, we're going to look at the importance of annam. We have a limited time left, so I'll chant the particular mantra. I think we'll have enough time to chant it together, and then next week we'll explore the meaning. But just to kind of give you an overview, what we're about to see is that annam is called jeshtam, which means the eldest of all creatures. So here, annam is food is taken as a living being. Food is not as a dead substance, but as a living entity. So that food is called the actual oldest, most mature, wise of creatures. Honestly, this is the first step in spirituality. Think about how you consume. When the food, this is why when we're at the ashram, when that food hits our plate, we don't know always where it, ideally, we always try to cook in. That's the first step, creating that loving atmosphere with the food. But also, we're not sure where it may be coming from a guest or whatever. So when it hits the plate, the reverence and attitude by which you see it and the way that you consume it can completely transform your mind. So we see this food we saw already as an expression of God, as Brahman. So similarly, that's why we chant that Gita shloka, Om Brahmarpanam Brahmahavihi, Brahmagna Brahmanahutam, Brahmevate Nagantavyam, Brahma Karma Samadhina. this whole process is of expression of Brahman. The spoon I use is Brahman. The bowl, the soup, the process of actually ingesting it, the whole thing is in throughout a God experience, a samadhi experience. So Rishi confirms that by saying, this food is the eldest of all creatures. And when you respect it, you will get it in plenty. So more on that to come, but let's just try to chant it with the remaining time. Anadvai praja prajayante ya kascha prativigum shritaha ato anne naiva jevante athe nadyapi yantyantataha annagum hi bhutanam jeshtham tasmaat sarvaushadamuchyate sarvam vaite annamapnuvanti ye annam brahmopasate annagum hi bhutanam jeshtham tasmaat sarvaushadamuchyate annaat bhutani jayante jatan yannena vardante adyate aticha bhutani tasmad annam taduchyata ite. Okay, I'll chant this and then you can repeat after me. Annadvai
Advait
praja
Praja
prajayante
Prajayante
yakascha
Yakascha
prativigum shritaha
Prithivigum Shritaha
ato annenaiva
Ato Annenaiva
jivanti
Jivanti
ate nadyapi yantyantataha
Atena Yantya Antataha
annagum hi bhutanam
Annahi Bhutanam
jeshtham
Jeshtam
tasmaat
Tasmat
sarvaushadamuchyate
Sarvaushadam Uchyate
sarvam vai
Sarvai
te annamapnuvanti
Te Annam Apnuvati
ye annam
Ye
brahmopasate
Brahmopasate
annagum hi
Annahi
bhutanam jeshtham
Bhutanam Jeshtam
tasmaat
Tasmat
sarvaushadamuchyate
Sarvaushadam Uchyate
annaad
Annat
bhutani jayante
Bhutani Jayante
jatan yannena
Jatanyanena
vardante
Vardhante
adyate aticha bhutani
Adyate Aticha Bhutani
tasmad annam
Tasmat Annam
taduchyata ite.
Tad Uchata Iti.
Great. How are you doing with the chanting? Shushila's shaking her head. I'm with you. We'll go through this one again when we meet next week. And we'll see what is the meaning of annam. We keep saying annam, annam. Why is it annam? Rishi backs that up with a shloka and says there's a reason why we call it annam. So we'll look into that when we meet next week. Leaving a cliffhanger. Close with a prayer. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha Hari Om. We bow before and honor all the teachers, from our Guru Swami Bodhananda, all the way to that silent one, Dakshinamurti. Peace be, peace be.